Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for being here. I'm very glad to be here. I'm a senior lecturer in architecture at University of West England in Bristol. So I did my PhD quite a few years ago on Passivhaus. Anyone know what Passivhaus is? Yeah, I think it's pretty. It's a German standard. It's as famous as Mercedes-Benz in sustainable architecture world. But if you haven't heard of it, it's a low energy standard that uses massive insulation and air tightness to achieve really, really low energy consumption inside the building. So my PhD was not about the technical aspect of Passivhaus, but how people use it. So I used the social technical lens. And I carried on with the Passivhaus research, and I start to look at the delivery side of Passivhaus. So this project is a project called co-produced framework. It's not working again. It's looking at the maturity level of the construction industry in delivering Passivhaus. Thank you. So this is a co-produced research. It's funded by UWE. It's internal fund, 25 grand for 2 years, basically buying my time 1 day per week out to do this project, because that's how academia works. It's co-produced by a network of stakeholders, including architects, Passivhaus designers, councils and housing associations and mechanical engineers. So we conducted co-production workshops in which everyone sort of take ownership of this project to co-produce this research. We did most of the workshops online with all these kind of actors in this industry. Or like I said, it's almost like Avengers assembled. So to give you a little bit background, the UK social housing is kind of in trouble. 10% of social housing fails decent home standard and a high level of fuel poverty in the household. And the health and comfort condition is not good either. So Passivhaus or other actual low energy standard has proven to reduce the fuel poverty and increase comfort standard and has long-term cost benefit. But there are persistent barriers in delivering these systems, and there's immaturity and inconsistency in delivery. So the aim of this project was to assess and increase the maturity of local councils and housing associations to deliver Passivhaus low energy housing. And to develop this maturity model, or like the last project, readiness index model, and to develop a roadmap on how to get from one level to the next. If you're not familiar with maturity model, in a nutshell, it's basically assessing an organization's capability to transition into something or take up a new skills and knowledge. And it can be made into a self-assessment strategy and a roadmap for development. And most of the time, it's assessing people's capability, process maturity, and technology readiness. So this project uses predominantly a co-production research. We had 5 co-production workshops from April to December. And each co-production workshop, there are a series of tasks for all the stakeholders to work on together. Parallel to this, I also conducted literature review, exploratory survey, case studies, and expert interviews to supplement the co-production workshop. And then parallel to that, it's the maturity model development. And we use Mirrorboard to facilitate the online co-production meeting. And this is one of the examples how these are used. So the first task for us is to design a survey to kind of get a sense of what are the barriers, what are the motivations, what are the supports needed for delivering Passivhaus from the perspective of local councils and housing associations. And I can give you a brief kind of summary of the findings. So for instance, at the beginning we thought a Passivhaus, there's a technical problem in delivering it. But what we found in the survey is the main barriers are not technical, they're more social and organizational. So you can see here the majority of the barrier, the most impactful barrier are the financial viability, the fear and risk aversion, and lack of policy support, uncertain future policy. But the motivations and ambitions are very high. In order to secure this carbon reduction, to alleviate fuel poverty, there's ethical consideration as well. So people want to get into this kind of field to deliver it. And the support need kind of maps onto the barriers. They need financial support to offset the cost, capability of the contractors, support from post-occupancy engagement and knowledge sharing, etc. And this survey and then mapped onto the co-production workshop. So these are all the co-production workshops have been recorded, and then thematic analysis were performed. So the findings from the workshop discussions reflect the survey. So the findings demonstrate a clear maturity trajectory across the sector. So there are organizations that are not familiar with Passivhaus delivery, they're more risk averse. On the other hand, those are familiar with the delivery, they kind of need more support to scale this up. And maturity, it's systematic rather than technical. So it's more about organizational change, policy support, sustainability culture, etc. Risk aversion is very central, even when with viable technical solutions. That's why it's really difficult to start, and most of the projects are one-off rather than scaled up. Also, maturity is a fragile trajectory. It kind of goes up and down based on how the leadership and the funding strategies work. And in long-term program, to scaling up the delivery, it needs to move past the exemplary project to kind of secure the supply chain, to kind of ask the supply chain to mature together with the project. Now, with all this knowledge, we developed the maturity model. So you can see from the first people, process, and technology, kind of all the dimensions kind of enriched into 6 dimensions: policy and funding, strategies, organizational capability, process maturity, supply chain readiness, and integration and scalability. And in those dimensions, there are 20 sub-dimensions in which all the experts can repeatedly score them to determine the weightings of each dimension. And then I used my magic to make a really complicated Excel sheet to reflect this. So with this assessment Excel sheet, you can kind of score based on each dimension and questions. And then at the end, you get an action plan to kind of increase your maturity. But of course, this is very much complicated. That's why I also developed an online version of it. So if you scan the QR code, it will take you to a website. So this website is a more straightforward version of the maturity model and assessment, in which you can see the whole model here with the description of each dimension and the different levels. And you can begin this assessment. These are all pre-filled by me, so you can see a kind of overall view. So these are the 6 dimensions where you can answer the question by having these drop-downs, select one of the drop-down model, drop-down answers, and going through this maturity model until the end where you get your result. A really beautiful chart to show you your score and weighted what your organization now and what you're aiming for in the future. And you can download a detailed breakdown and then view your action plan. So this is for each dimension based on which level you're aiming for. It gives you an action of step-by-step actions you can take to achieve this. And so this is basically what the end of the project. So not to overly stretch the time, this project provides the first co-produced sector-specific maturity model for organizations to plan capability. It also has what I say, significant practical and policy relevance. Future work includes scaling up the model, doing more validation, larger scale survey, testing it, and I already have a PhD student looking at the maturity of the supply chain in relation to this. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jing, for the presentation and demonstration. I think we have time for